necessarily. There is a lot of truth in a lot of New Age beliefs. People who are New Age practitioners don't just believe lies. And if they did, then it would be easy to disprove, and they wouldn't have that many followers. There is a lot of truth there. There are many traditional believers, Christians and so forth, who take a look at New Age programs that talk about mind over matter, and automatically they believe that it's all fake. It's all nothing but trickery to get people's money, and none of it's real. I disagree with that. I think that with fortune telling and necromancy, with the consorting with the dead and channeling and all that stuff, I'm not saying that it's all fake, and I don't think the Bible says that it's fake either. In fact, there's evidence that it doesn't say. It never said that it was fake. There's actually some credibility in what is being done. What the Bible is saying is, don't do it. It says it's wrong, and it'll put you on God's bad side.
But wait a minute. Isn't God intervening on behalf of those who cultivate their sixth sense? Since only God can perform miracles, then aren't those gifted with extrasensory perception doing the Lord's work? I myself have gone to a fortune teller for a reading, and the lady was very kind. She said nothing immoral or bad about God, and the vast majority of the things that she told me came true. She named specific details that were very unique to me, and they did come to pass. I myself have even been rarely made aware of future events through dreams or premonitions concerning myself or people I care about. If God is against the cultivation of such senses, then why in the world does he keep empowering these seemingly miraculous phenomena for many New Age practitioners?
That's a very, very good question. It's a fantastic question. Now, the answer, however, is not simple. There are several explanations as to why these things may be taking place. Just because something appears miraculous does not mean that God is directly causing it. The traditional explanation for extrasensory activity is that it was of the devil, that demons were behind it all, that anytime something seemingly supernatural occurred, if it wasn't an act of God, then it had to be an act of Satan. That may be true in some instances. There may be some demonic activity going on. I certainly have treated people who have been involved in the occult with phenomena that could be interpreted as demonic oppression. However, I don't think that we have to go to demons to explain all extrasensory perception. I believe that some extrasensory perception is due to the physical nature of the universe. I believe that quantum principles govern part of the material universe. And that is why some people are able to exhibit extrasensory abilities. There is evidence that we live in a quantum universe. Human consciousness has the ability to interact on higher levels than what we're used to interacting on: length, height, width, and time. Parts of our consciousness are able to step outside the boundaries of length, height, width, and time. We are connected in ways that we cannot see because we live in a quantum universe. Because of the nature of the universe, because of the nature of consciousness, we are sometimes able to supersede our perceived boundaries. What do I mean by that? On the left, you have an isolated entangled pair of superpositioned complementary quantum particles. Now, those are electrons. In the figure here, both A and B represent electrons. And so now these electrons, if one is in spin up, the other is spin down, and vice versa. They somehow communicate with each other, and they know. So normally these electrons are bouncing in their spin states between up and down, up and down, up, down, and so forth. But whenever one is up, the other is down, and vice versa. Even if you separate them by miles, they still, if you stop them in time, then if one is in spin up, the other will be spin down, and vice versa. How do they know? This information between them travels faster than the speed of light. Okay? Even if you separate them by light years, it doesn't matter. They know. They know. If you let's call one of these electrons Bob, the other one we'll call Jim. Bob and Jim. If Jim is up, Bob is down. If Bob is down, Jim is up. Okay? And even if you separate them and they can't see one another by miles and miles, if you take a picture of them on June 6th, 2014 at 12 o'clock p.m. and 00 seconds, then guess what? Bob is up, Jim is down. I mean, they know. even if separated. How do they communicate with one another? And the theory, the prevailing theory at this time, is that these electrons are connected by a dimension that we can't see. So even though they're not connected in the normal, we live in length, height, width, and time, we can't see the connection between them, but they are present in other dimensions, and in at least one other dimension that we can't see. So they are still connected. It's hard for us to get our head around that because we live in a universe of length, height, width, and time. Right now, I'm at my house at the longitude and latitude coordinates that describe where I live, and I'm in my studio, which is 15 by 10, something like that, okay? And the time right now, it's 11:59 at night, okay? And but it's the date, and so that's where I am. I'm at this length, this height, this width, this time. That describes my position in the universe. But there are other spatial dimensions that we can't perceive. And that causes some perceptual difficulties. Because, like, for example, let's say this particular doctor is looking at an apple here. And he sees the seeds in the center of the apple. And you say you're looking here at seed A and seed B. And according to his observation, none of the starch that is surrounding seed B is also in contact with seed A, because he's a two-dimensional critter. Okay, he's not 3D, he's only 2D. He has an x-axis and a y-axis. He doesn't know anything about the z-axis. So he would presume that none of the starch touching seed A is also touching seed B. But those of us who live in the 3D world realize that if you had a whole apple there, then we've got a z dimension, and some of that starch is coming out at us, and it wraps around, and the two seeds are in contact with the same starch milieu, but you just can't see that connection in a two-dimensional state. But if string theory is correct, then the very matter of our being is oscillating in more dimensions than length, height, width, and time. Consider this ant here. The ant's body is made up of molecules. The molecules themselves are made up of atoms. The atoms are made up of subatomic particles. These subatomic particles are things like electrons and neutrons. And the electrons and neutrons, the neutrons and the protons that are in the nucleus of the atom, these are made of quarks, up quarks and down quarks and strange quarks and charm quarks and things like that, okay? Now these quarks themselves are made up of strings. And if string theory is correct, these strings are oscillating or vibrating in multiple dimensions. And if relativity is correct, then we live in at least an 11-dimensional universe. Okay? And so we have the matter that makes up our bodies it's vibrating in dimensions that we can't see. Now think about that. If there are connections that we can't see, then maybe things that appear not attached to one another are really attached. Let's go back to that observation that we talked about earlier, where you have two electrons that are entangled with one another, and their behaviors remain entangled even if they're separated by light years. Now, we can't see the connection between them, but imagine, if you will, look at the graphic that we have here in the lower figure. If those electrons, now in the lower figure here, you see these molecules that are connected in a two-dimensional lattice, but then you see a three-dimensional, those blue stick figures represent a three-dimensional aspect to the diagram. Now notice that the blue hexagons are connected by this network because it's a 3D lattice. Now, if you were just a two-dimensional person, you would not see that those blue hexagons were connected in any way. You have to be able to perceive the third dimension in order to see the connection. Now, going back to those electrons that are entangled, we can't see them connected to one another, even though they're separated by light years in our space. But if there are those other dimensions and they are attached through one of those dimensions, then they're still physically touching one another, which explains how they know. It explains how one knows when the other is down and the other is up. Now, what am I talking about quantum theory for? What does that have to do with the New Age and all this stuff? I mean, come on. Well, A couple, Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose. Hameroff's, well, by trade, he's an anesthesiologist who has an interest in brain and consciousness. And Roger Penrose is a physicist. He's one of the most famous physicists in the world, actually. He's won awards with other very famous physicists, so you can look him up and you realize he's pretty far up there. But their particular model of consciousness is like this. I'm just going to read a paragraph that summarizes their belief with regard to near-death experiences.